Now, when Sarah first picked up a camera 11 years ago, I taught her everything I knew about photography. I guided her, I told her what she was doing right and what she was doing wrong, which wasn't easy. Anybody with wives in photography or husbands in photography, you can't tell them what they're doing wrong. I'm incredibly proud of what she's achieved in such a short period of time, and most of that is down to her talent. But if there's one thing that I insisted on right from the start, from the moment that I first handed her a camera, the one thing she could never compromise on, it was that she had to go down her own photographic path. She had to see the world through her own eyes. She wasn't to go and copy someone or try and emulate somebody else's style. A decade later, you can see this in our approaches, in our work, in our interests, and also our ambitions in photography. We are so completely different from each other, and that is a very good thing. So in this video, I'm going to share the same advice I gave to Sarah all those years ago and explain why copying other photographers or their work is never a good thing to do. And I'll also give you some tips at the end of the video just to help you see the world through your own eyes. For me, copying a photographer's work or a style is completely futile. Honestly, it makes absolutely no sense. If you think about it for a second, everybody is different. We're all individuals, and the way that we've been brought up, our life experiences, our social circles, our mental health states, where we live, even our height and weight contribute to how we see the world. So if you think about it, how can it be possible to copy somebody else? Now, you can argue that within certain genres of photography, things like portraits, advertising, weddings to some extent, where you have a lot of control over what happens in front of the camera, you can create a similar look and feel to another photographer's work. But with street photography, everything is so random. It's so unpredictable. If we try and copy another photographer, this could well suffocate any creativity and individuality that we may have. Instead of walking down a street and seeing things that naturally attract our eye, we end up looking for a certain type of photograph that we've seen before. And this leads to a lot of frustration if we don't see the photograph. And anyway, if we did see the photograph, it's never going to be as good as the one we're trying to copy. And what's worse is that we could potentially miss a lot of really good images that fit the way that we see the world just because we want our work to look like somebody else's. It's much better to try and find your own style and see where that takes you. But you can't do that if your brain is switched into finding another photographer's images. Now, there is a huge difference between copying a photographer and being inspired by a photographer. Now, for me, inspiration is really the result of a process which involves looking at a photographer's images, breaking them down and working out why they work visually. And this process basically educates my eye and improves my visual literacy. Now, Saw Leiter's work is very popular at the moment, and many photographers go out of their way to try and emulate his colour style. The problem with emulating someone like Leiter is that we don't live in mid-20th century New York, and not many of us are talented abstract painters. So how are we going to get Leiter style photographs when the main subject of his images doesn't exist anymore, and we don't have the visual repertoire of an abstract painter? Now, if you take a few moments to step away from wanting to emulate Leiter and just look at his photographs, if you break them down and work out why they appeal to your eye, so much so that you actually want to go and copy them, you will actually see someone who uses limited colour palettes, predominantly red, yellow and blue. Somebody who is drawn to abstract elements and simple, uncomplicated visual motifs. You see someone who often shoots from cover with a longer lens. He has a very deliberate voyeuristic style where people are almost props to add a human element to the scene he's looking at. For me, this is a much better way of using a photographer's style to help you get better photographs. You just have to learn, you have to understand and educate your eye. A couple of months ago, I was asked how I keep my enthusiasm and desire to photograph after 37 years of making a living from photography. Now, obviously, Sarah is a big part of that. I mean, her enthusiasm and her drive is infectious. But as I've got older, my photographic tastes have changed quite a bit. And I see this in the work that I'm producing at the moment. And this in itself is really exciting. I try and leave myself open to the influence of new photographers or photographers that have been and gone but I haven't actually seen before. This keeps my eye educated and it keeps me interested in photography. Now, I honestly believe it would be impossible to be as enthusiastic as I am today if I'd spent my whole life trying to be somebody else. So to help you get away from this idea of trying to emulate somebody else's work, I've got some tips for you. The first thing is expose yourself to as many different genres of photography as you possibly can. I have more books on fashion than I do street photography. Fashion adds something new to my visual palette. You know, if you're working all the time in one genre, it's very good to have influence from another genre just to shake things up sort of visually. If you think about it, you can't actually copy these photographs. I haven't got access to beautiful models and fantastic locations. So you get the benefit of educating your eye through the work of another genre, but without having the desire to copy those photographs. Now, last month I did a video on the 21mm lens, and I'll link to that at the end of this video. But it was this guy, the fashion photographer Jean-Luc Sieff, who actually inspired me to look at the focal length in a different way. Now, I have 5 of his books here. But this is the best one by far, and I'll link to it in the description below. Now, the second tip, and kind of following on from this, go to exhibitions. It doesn't matter who the photographer is. The beauty of an exhibition is that you get to see a body of work properly printed and arranged in a way that represents the photographer's vision. You get to see the photographs at the size that they were intended to be shown at. Very often it concentrates the mind. Now, the first exhibition I took Sarah to was one with Martin Parr and Tony Ray Jones. She walked around the exhibition I think 3 times, around the Tony Ray Jones part of the exhibition 3 times, not the Martin Parr, but anyway. And each time she went round, she was poring over each individual photograph. She was working out why she liked them so much. And her reaction to seeing this exhibit was something that I've not witnessed since, you know, and we've been to many exhibitions. It wasn't just the quirkiness of the pictures. It wasn't just the framing or the layers or the subject or the juxtapositions. Sarah felt after going to that exhibition that Tony Ray Jones's work gave her permission to go and take photographs which had humour in them and lots of character, and photographs that even poked fun at people, but in a very respectful way. Now, Sarah's never wanted to take photographs like Tony Ray Jones, but in some of her work, I can definitely see an influence. Now, I wonder, how many times have photographers Googled which lens did such and such a photographer use? You know, as photographers, particularly male photographers, I think this is a male thing, we're absolutely fascinated by this. Knowing the focal length that a photographer uses is really only important if you actually want to try and emulate that photographer's style. The better way of going around it is to try and find the focal length that suits your way of seeing the world. Try out different lenses. You know, beg, borrow, steal them. You know, see what you're, well, don't steal them, obviously. See what you're comfortable using. 2 photographers with the same focal length of lens will use it in different ways to take different pictures. There's no hard and fast rules here. Now, I mentioned Sarah and the influence of Tony Ray Jones. As far as I'm aware, he didn't shoot with a 28mm, and yet it's the lens she uses for 90% of her work. You know, there is a tendency these days to want to be popular on social media, and some photographers feel their popularity is a measure of their talent. Trust me, it isn't. As I've said many times, the person liking or even ignoring your work is probably sat on the toilet doom scrolling Instagram on a smartphone. They may be visually illiterate. They might actually prefer reels of pugs dressed as ballerinas. We don't know. So don't worry about it. Now, you have to remember with social media that the bigger accounts, the accounts that photographers tend to aspire to be like, tend to produce photos that are quite simple. Photographs that are easy to view in a small phone format. You know, they're often shot to a formula and they're really easy to replicate. Now, we've all seen the thousands of high contrast monochrome images of people walking through shafts of light. The reason they're so popular is because they work in the Instagram phone format and they often get a lot of traction. And there is always a tendency for some photographers to want to try and copy them. Please don't. You'll just add to the noise. Go and do something different. Instagram's a funny thing. I still think it's worth posting to Instagram in 2025 because I think it's an easy way for people to see your work. It's more convenient than a website. So I tend to use it in the same way as I would a gallery on a website. And of course, our Instagram account has myself and Sarah's work. What I like to do though is turn off the like count. You know, you don't need to see that. I don't need to see that. I'm not interested in how well a photograph is doing, and I honestly couldn't tell you what sort of numbers we got on any of our pictures. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, we'd love to see you subscribe to the channel. If you have any comments or any thoughts on what I've been talking about in this video, just let me know below, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video. Until then, take care.